everyone to the meeting. Just wanted to share this evening something about how to control our fear. Now, it doesn't matter who we are. There's the possibility of fear affecting us, and fear turning into anxiety and having physiological effects on us. This can be even if we're an experienced speaker or a beginner speaker. The difference between an experienced speaker and a beginner speaker primarily is that the beginner doesn't necessarily know how to control the fear on the stage, whereas an experienced speaker has developed ways to control that fear. Now, as I said before, fear is something that seems to be inherent in us. And it seems like we have to discern whether fear is legitimate or it's not legitimate. So for example, if we're going to cross a busy highway and we're fearful of it, there might be a good reason for it because we could get run over. But if we're up here in front of a jolly bunch of toastmasters who are all supportive, yet we're fearful, we realize that intellectually, rationally, that's not really legitimate, but it's there anyways. So we have to find ways to quell the anxiety that can build up as a result of that fear, and then the physiological effects that can take place as a result of it. Now, there are many different types of fear, or places that fear can show up, and this being a canned Toastmaster speech, which is basically an agenda that Toastmasters puts out from time-tested years of doing this. They put forward 4 main areas that fear can come from. There's probably many others, though. The first one they talk about is fear of the unknown, fear of unknown situations. And this makes sense in a way. We can understand that, even remember probably from the time we were kids. When we turn the light off, all of a sudden, there could be a ghost somewhere, right? Turn the light on, all of a sudden, that's all gone away. Nothing's changed but the light. So why are we afraid? Maybe it has something to do with that unknown. We don't know. So if we have to come up on a stage, we feel maybe vulnerable, and there's so many unknowns that could happen up there. So that could be a problem. Another one they talk about is the fear of failure. And who knows where this comes from, but perhaps it has to do with maybe we've experienced a trauma when we were in grade school. We didn't pass a class, and we got teased or something like this. And coming up on a stage where there's no time to push the rewind button. It's going forward from here. What happens if I fail? If I freeze up? There can be a great amount of anxiety that can build up with the result of those kind of thought processes that cross our minds. The next one they talk about is feeling foolish. And it's related to the next one somehow, but it's the tendency that we might feel disgraced. I remember looking at a list of top 10 fears that humans have recently. And up near the fear of death was the fear of being rejection. And sometimes when we feel foolish or we've been teased for being a fool or doing something goofy, it's a feeling of rejection. So that could have something to do with it. The next one they talk about is boring the audience. I thought this was kind of odd, but then I thought about it. Another thing that we have as human beings is this tendency to say, I'm not good enough, but he or she is good enough. Somehow everybody else is good enough, but I'm not good enough. This audience is too good for me, and therefore I'm just going to be a bore. So not measuring up is a big one. These are all important. There's probably others, but it's going through things like this in ourselves tells us something about ourselves and gets us to realize a little bit about where we are. Sometimes if we're going to try to improve, it's a good idea to know where we are. What are those trigger points? How can we help ourselves with that? But especially knowing what they are. Now, it's also a good idea to realize that as was mentioned before, that anxiety can actually lead to physiological debilitation. And I experienced that for sure. Just before I joined Toastmasters, I had to give a presentation in an area about this size. It was about 10 or 11 people. And I got confused. I misplaced my papers a little bit flustered. And I completely froze. I couldn't even talk. And when I found my papers, I couldn't even read them. There was a blur in my vision. So that to me is a serious anxiety and physical debilitation. Other things that can happen are things like butterflies in the stomach, uncontrollable shakes, sweaty palms, lightheadedness, dizziness, this sort of things. And the reason apparently this happens is because anxiety actually causes an increase in heart rate, an increase in adrenaline, and increased blood pressure and more oxygen to the muscles and the brain. So if you give your brain a blast of oxygen, all of a sudden it can go haywire if it's not controlled. And I experienced something like this a few days ago. I was walking on the river parkway, river walkways. I like to go for a walk on the weekend. And the sun went down because it was early, and I was walking along very peacefully thinking about something. And all of a sudden, a runner came up behind me. I didn't know he was there until he was right there. I got spooked like this, and I could feel it all the way up this side, even the back of my head. It's like all my capillaries went like that instantly, and I was sensing it after he went by, softening up a little bit as time went by. And some people say it has to do with this fight or flight response that we can have. If a wild animal was to jump on us, something happens, so there's an automatic response. And anxiety, whether we think about something or something's actually happening on a deep subconscious level, the body doesn't seem to know the difference. So we suffer these debilitating effects. So if we do, the question is, how can we then help ourselves? Because that's where this is leading to, of course. How can we control this fear response? Once again, Toastmasters recommends 3 main areas that we can work on. And I put them in an order that I think they belong. The first one they talk about, or one of them they talk about, is relaxation. Because after all, one of the things that happens when we have anxiety is we can have physiological stress. If, therefore, we can reduce that stress, we can reduce the anxiety. And in that effect, the mind and the body are one. What happens in the mind can happen in the body and vice versa. So they talk about breathing exercises. They talk about exercise in general. Those 2 main things. And, of course, breathing exercises often can be used immediately before, even when getting to the podium. They talk about how if you come up to the podium, it's sometimes a good idea to look at everybody and take a deep breath. And even before, if we do practice abdominal breathing, some people apparently can tend to breathe from their chest, and they can hyperventilate and get low on oxygen after a while. But if we take some deep breaths, we get in the rhythm of breathing deeply. Exercise is another one they talk about. Now this, of course, we all know that exercise is good for us on a general sense. So if we can get into an exercise routine, this helps us with our temperament. But they also talk about if we have the opportunity to step out somehow before going on the stage and do some exercises. They recommend deep breath in, reach up, and then slowly breathe out, touch the toes several times over. It gets the body to change. When we can change the body, we can change our mood, our mentality, our temperament, and our stress level. They also talk about reaching out, turning the hands around 10 times, and 10 times in reverse. There's also getting the blood flowing in the head by dipping the shoulders and the head, rolling around several times. off on our own somewhere. Just relax in it. So these are exercises. I added, because I believe this to be true, and not only that, I've read scientific reports on this being true, diet can help us. If we eat a certain amount of food, fill up on eggs or dairy or something if there's allergies that people have, before doing a speech, well, if there's there can be a big disaster happening there if it's a physiological effect. But also there's something to be said for how we eat in general. There was a study done about 25 years ago in a prison in Hawaii where there was hardened criminals there. They had a terrible problem with law and order inside the prison. So they changed the diet. They brought in dietitians. They changed the diet to a very plain, a lot of raw foods, healthy foods, and the temperament and the violence went down drastically. So diet can also change our moods, help us to change our moods. That's relaxation. The second one is visualization. Visualization is something we all do anyway, but we can actually instigate this before we go on a stage, even just before we're on stage, or even several days before as we're preparing. And visualization works in conjunction with relaxation. If we can relax ourselves and get ourselves to visualize as though a daydream, a very vivid daydream, what it is that we're going to do. It's best if we visit our stage even and realize what is around the stage. We get a sense for it. And then when we visualize, we can close our eyes, and the subconscious, if we have a vivid imagination of it, doesn't know the difference between the real thing and the visualization. So we can begin by imagining the people talking out there and standing off to the edge, and the introducer reading the introduction about us. And the time comes for us to walk on. We hear the applause. We walk on with confidence onto the stage. Arrive at the podium. Arms up and gesture. Look at everybody. Perhaps take a deep breath and begin a speech with confidence and flow all the way through. Visualizing the room, visualizing the people who are listening, and seeing them smile, seeing them connect, seeing them enjoying it. All of this is visualization. But, so that's number two. The third one they recommend, and this is the kicker, is experience. There's nothing like experience. We finally have to get to that. Repetition builds skill and confidence. Confidence kicks anxiety's backside in a big way. It does. Practice. We can practice in front of a mirror. We can practice in front of a video. We can practice in front of friends, family, groups like Toastmasters, or wherever we can. The more we practice, the better we get. The more confident we get, the more the anxiety disappears and subsides. And of course, when we add that to greater degrees of preparation for our speeches, we have preparation, we have practice, we have the makings of confidence. And confidence is where it's at for sure. So in the conclusion then, I would say yes, we can all feel the effects of fear, whether we're advanced in public speaking or we're beginning. But the good news is that there are solutions to be able to help us alleviate the debilitating effects of this anxiety. Certainly we can learn something new with regards to ourselves and what our capabilities are, but certainly we can also manage it through things like relaxation, visualization, and ultimately through the experience of actually doing it. And yes, we can control our fear.